Near the end of Friendship is Magic, a set of outtakes were leaked of various voice actors flubbing their lines while recording late series episodes like The Ending of the End and The Perfect Pair. They're amazing, but the one I want to focus on is an exchange between Nicole Oliver and one of the producers about how to deliver the scene where Grogar's bell drains her of her magic.
Hi, sorry. When you say Scream, are you looking for Scream, or are you looking for Children's Saturday Morning Scream? What do you?
I'm looking for it. Almost seems painful that the energy's being dragged out of you.
What are they gonna do? Cancel us? Make it scary.
All right.
174,
Plug your ears. 176.
I love this clip because Nicole brings up an interesting nuance when it comes to portraying fear. Intensity of fear response is a tricky gradient to get right. When I turn on a scary movie, I have to know what kind of scare I'm in the mood for, from charmingly spooky to pants-wettingly terrifying. These are all rewarding experiences, and each scratch a different kind of itch. Children's media has access to this same array of scares, but unlike my Friday nights, kids shows have to deploy scares with considerably more finesse. A large portion of kids shows are at least partially merch-driven, and unless the series in question is one of a handful who have horror baked into their appeal, creators have to craft their scares with extra care to avoid alienating a younger audience that historically scares easier than the general public. Given these kinds of restrictions, My Little Pony dabbled in horror much more than I would have imagined before jumping into the franchise head first. Not always for the best, but with enough forethought to know how far to turn the dial to deliver the most memorable experience. I tried to categorize these moments into a somewhat sloppy list of 5 flavors of scary, and I want to take a look at how MLP uses this entire gamut of horror experience. Level 1 is no more frightening than your average Halloween episode. Most of these episodes take place on or around Halloween, or Nightmare Night if you prefer, and any sense of scariness is drowned out by the fun and cozy atmosphere of characters gearing up for Halloween festivities. There's an entire wiki out there dedicated to chronicling every Halloween special in television history, and for good reason. They're just fun. A good Halloween episode gets the entire cast together to have a good time, coupled with the added benefit of putting your favorite characters in fun, silly outfits that mix or match with their personality. It's uncommon to see Halloween episodes treated as anything other than fun, light filler. Less chill down your spine, more turn on the AC. My Little Pony does these kinds of episodes really, really well. Both Nightmare Night episodes are among the best in the series and do a really solid job being fun, silly outings. Applejack is a lion. Even Make Your Mark has proven itself when it comes to light and spooky episodes, complete with candy and costumes and Pip the sassy witch. Most of each episode is devoid of any danger, and any actual scares are played for laughs, usually accompanied by a heavy dose of slapstick. I'm kinda sad we only got 2 Nightmare Night episodes in Friendship is Magic, but we were lucky enough to have a half dozen other episodes that I would classify as Halloween adjacent. Power Ponies puts the gang into legally safe horsed-up superheroes set against the dark skyline of Metropolis, and Castlemania has all the DNA of an episode of Scooby-Doo with the over-the-top amount of cobwebs and secret passageways. Level 2 is where I put those moments of conflict that maybe went a little harder than normal. Fear is just a physiological response to danger, and sometimes the franchise dialed up the danger a little more than they probably had to get the point across. A lot of major villains do this, but hey, queen stays queen. Queen Chrysalis was designed by Rebecca Dart, who decided that Chrysalis should have insectoid features after hearing her name for the first time. Rebecca drew design inspiration from the scary cute artwork of manga artist Junko Mizuno, as well as Hideshi Hino, my new favorite horror fascination responsible for Hell Baby and 2 entries in the Guinea Pig series. The resulting character model is wonderfully creepy. She's so naturally alien in her design, with fangs, insect wings, and a gnarled horn, that it's almost effortless to work her into borderline frightening confrontations. Not to mention the inherent paranoia of being able to change shape at will. Her swarm descending on the Canterlot wedding is 80% of what makes that episode so memorable, and the show really let her stretch her legs when she returned in season 6. The breathing changeling hive designed by Tanya LaHoe is already alien, but they turned her up in that season finale with those amniotic cocoons and that neck rotation from the ceiling. Ugh! T-Rex is freaky too for all the magic sucking he does in Twilight's Kingdom, but he just doesn't get under my skin the way Chrysalis does. Sombra's a scary dude too, and that's not even counting how unhinged he is in the comics, which is generally where the franchise felt more comfortable exploring scarier material. I'm thinking mostly about his appearance as an ominous black cloud in the Crystal Empire, but he's also got a penchant for mind control that becomes an actual plot point after being brought up in one of Starlight's alternate timelines. Speaking of which, most of those alternate histories are a little intense compared to other season finales, in a way that I found refreshing, but might have caused some tonal issues with the series if it became a recurring trend. I'm much more a fan of singular scares, like the Pony of Shadows being this venom-like parasitic darkness that consumes and pilots its host, or the sudden intensity of surprise villains like Daybreaker. I was even put off by the Chimera from Some Pony to Watch Over Me. It's not a great episode, but the Chimera heads spend a lot of time talking about how they want to straight up eat one of the main characters. Equestria and its magic system is really well set up for these pockets of space that allow for more danger than your average Technicolor horse show. The Everfree Forest is the center of several episodes, including one where it threatens to overgrow Ponyville, and another where Spike is nearly killed by a Timberwolf, a non-organic monstrosity that wouldn't look out of place in Shadow of the Colossus. Even the adventures of Daring Do allow for all manner of quicksand, booby traps, and gator chases set against a jungle backdrop. Quite a bit of Gen 1 would be here too, like Katrina and Grogar, but I haven't had time to bring myself up to speed in that department just yet. Maybe a Gen 1 video down the road, who knows. Level 3 is the first level where the show says, okay, let's scare some kids. These are conscious efforts from the writers and the production team to freak out their target audience. It arguably started with Pinky's temporary sanity slippage in Party of One, and continued with Cutie Pox, a disarmingly freaky episode about Apple Bloom forfeiting all bodily autonomy by ingesting a foreign substance she didn't understand. I'm a freak, and body horror is one of my favorite subgenres, so it was a really bizarre treat getting to see Apple Bloom confront the possibility of the just barely kid-friendly fate of forever tap dancing in French. As the animators began becoming more and more comfortable with experimenting with elements like light, shadow, transparency, and color grading, the team became much more adept at animating really creepy and memorable moments throughout the series. This includes all 3 of the Counselor Luna episodes in Bloom and Gloom, Sleepless in Ponyville, and For Whom the Sweetie Belle Toils, as well as Bats, one of those Halloween-adjacent episodes I talked about earlier. I don't think this one would be nearly as spooky if it weren't for 3 years of honing the show's art direction to a fine point. This all comes to a head in Season 5's Scaremaster, where the girls consent to enter a maze full of spooky shenanigans, and it really feels like the animators were having an absolute blast being allowed the rare opportunity to add tons of polish to an intentionally scary scene. The underground scenes are great, and I love fake Granny's head falling over to pay off a fun Cowardly Lion gag. Level 4 is when the scares escape the confines of what most kids find scary, bugs, wolves, headless grannies, and starts dipping into the world of adult fears, like self-harm, suicide, and the death of a loved one. I had that whole rant in my fan theories video about bringing up sensitive topics, but most of the time, intense topics like these are dealt with using a handy magical shorthand that puts up a contextual barrier between the target audience and these upsetting real-world issues by using magical nightmare creatures, stone spells, or hibernation. These help to cushion the blow of serious subject matter for kids, but it's frequently audacious to see a kids program even swing at ideas like these in the first place. The Cutie Map is in my personal top 10 episodes, partially because of how blatantly it reflects really upsettingly faithful cultist control tactics, and partially because despite the gravity of its subtext, the episode's quality escapes relatively unscathed. The franchise doesn't even feel the need to reframe the issue most of the time. Sometimes the issue is just there off to the side. You remember that song where Diamond Tiara sings about how much pressure she's under from her parents to succeed? Have you heard the original demo for that song that leaked a few years ago? Listen for one important word change that didn't make it into the final song. Someone along the chain of command must have made the call that hinting at child abuse might have been a little too close to reality for comfort and tweaked the lyrics to scale it back a bit. Other ideas are mentioned, but get brushed aside before the fridge horror can really sink in. As someone who has suffered from anxiety for almost a decade, Fluttershy's All Eyes on Me freak-out from Hurricane Fluttershy feels remarkably genuine, and Thorax literally starving outside the city limits of the Crystal Empire reminds me a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, about a utopia that only exists because one lonely child is kept in a state of constant misery. It's a story that hit me at a really formative moment in my life and helped shape who I am now, so his episode hit me just that little bit harder. Make Your Mark has its share of detractors, but one element of the show that I've seen most people respond positively to is the variety and authenticity of the hardships that Misty goes through. Spoilers for Chapter 5 in about 15 seconds, but from Chapter 2 onward, Misty and Opaline are shown to have this really uneasy Cinderella evil stepmother relationship that reminded more than a few viewers of being a child with an abusive home life. The show doesn't explore that relationship, but having it there as an available comparison demonstrates that the show can still acknowledge scary real-world situations, like that whole subplot about Alpha Biddle losing his daughter years ago. The show just casually throws a parent's worst nightmare right on top of the most beleaguered new character in the franchise, and the deliberate decision to play this development straight really works. Where the franchise shines the most, though, is when it drops all pretense and tries to bare-knuckle its way through some of my current worst fears, like having let down your friend, being being forever defined by your past mistakes, or having a petty argument be the last time you see your daughter alive. Despite how good 2 out of 3 of those episodes are, all 3 give me a pit in my stomach because the conflict feels so genuine, and the series doesn't do any conditioning to get you ready for these kinds of emotional mud pits. Let's go back to that conversation in the voice booth with Nicole Oliver.
It almost seems painful that the energy's being dragged out of you.
What are they gonna do? Cancel us? Make it scary.
As a studio preparing episodes for a prolonged toy commercial, animation studio DHX Media was required to send episodes to Hasbro for approval before being slated for air. It's why the screams you hear in that blooper reel were toned down for the final release. It also allows the property owners to request things like, hey, could you please pull back on the face melting effects in the 3rd act of 813? Or, yeah, Luna losing her teeth in the creepy Philly circle in 710 looks great, go ahead and put a bow on it. Level 5 is all of the outrageous nightmare fuel that somehow made its way into a children's show for 9 to 12-year-olds. Stuff like that abstract panic attack from Philly Vanilli. It's a clear step up from Fluttershy's Imagine spot 2 seasons ago, and it feels like a conspicuous choice to intensify those feelings with a gentle wave warp and that pencil sketch evaporation effect. A lot of the freakiest imagery tends to involve Fluttershy now that I think about it. I spend a lot more time than I probably should thinking about that group of changelings that tried to bait Discord by all pretending to be Fluttershy in distress.
We're probably all changelings. You shouldn't rescue any of us.
That's evil supervillain behavior. And while it was never animated, just the idea that Zecora and Fluttershy were almost turned into trees is a really extreme visual to put in a kid's show. If you read the comics, there's a throwaway gag in the 3rd issue where Chrysalis outright murders a puppy in front of the CMCs, just because she could. It's in the comics where the team was allowed to experiment with darker content, but it comes out of nowhere and is never mentioned again, which is bananas to me. It also brings up an interesting point for which I want to play devil's advocate, because even I'm not sure how I feel on this. Is it ever too much? On the spectrum of kids media, MLP is already pretty tame. It's not really a scary show, and going in expecting it to be would be pretty dumb. I wonder if episodes like 28 Pranks Later ever turned anyone off from the show. To be fair, there are other problems to be had with that episode that don't gel with longtime fans, but is it a valid criticism to complain that Pranks doesn't do a good job representing the tone of the show? A lot of it feels like an experimentation with style by members of the team who thought it might be fun to do a zombie episode, and it's not an accident that the episode's title borrows from the 2nd best zombie movie ever made. I love it, and I will always appreciate shows that try new things, but I can't help but wonder if there's anyone out there that was turned off by these kinds of stylistic decisions. It probably comes down to a subjective matter of taste, but if you're out there, I get it. Childhood horror is hard to write, and even harder to get right. Just keep the teeth dreams to a minimum, please. Happy Halloween, and thanks for watching. For this script, I deliberately avoided moments that were scary to think about, but didn't really get played that way in their episodes. Things like the mirror pool, Starlight's mind control, and the love potion from Hearts and Hooves Day. Maybe next year I'll do an episode on unintentional horror, because there's a lot to talk about. Until next time, I'm some horse on the internet. Thanks for watching.